Hello guys, what's up? Yeah, and by the way, if you probably are seeing this, it's definitely something new, like a new format, and I never say no to something new, I guess. What we're going to do here, let's sit and just, chat and have a cup of coffee, as you can see, or tea, depending on the situation. And I just decided to put this background because it's sort of more neutral. And before you look at my pretty face and the background of the pretty face, you actually let's just stick to the point. And the point is, yeah, we have some things that we could discuss and just talk. And I felt like doing this for quite some time. Uh, you know, when I'm gaming and when I'm just doing other things like thoughts that come up, and it just feels like the right place to say them here. So you might consider this to be like would be a venting thing, but it's not venting. It's not going to be right. Well, let's try to make this like a sort of brainstorming thing. So as you can probably see, today I've just added on chat like just to get a bit of a sense of what I'm going to talk around. And obviously, it's going to be about either gaming or some aspects of gaming. I said events. I call events because I don't like to call it news. It's more broad events because news that you stick to those things you have to report. The events it's a bit more broad. And I guess some general discussion for any other topic like I might think or it could be appropriate to be discussing. So let's start with this. Okay. Now concerning about gaming, it's not nothing of new thing, but I like to position myself as an honest gamer. Somebody who doesn't use gaming as a platform to bash, to bully or to cyberbully others. I use it like a tool, like any person would use, but in an inclusive and respectful way. I don't think gaming is drug or an addiction. I don't like those comments, those hate that hate or rage that is against gamers, and I know there is, and I know there is. Believe me, it's not just prejudice; it's just pure hatred. And concerning gaming, uh, like there are people who just do this for work. It's no big deal. Like they work, they become pros in that, and like that's fine. The problem of gaming is when it becomes a means to like cancel people, like you start to rig and match fix games. And this is the real problem. The problem is not the video game. The problem is the match fixing that takes place in video games, particularly the the online video games, like the multiplayer, mass multiplayer games. One of the games I've been playing, obviously more recently and with far more experience than others in terms of other games, that's Age of Empires 2. I just used to that kind of franchise, and while playing in those games, I just noticed some things that just don't make any sense. And one of them is how a person can have like 50,000 profiles. It's just like why do you need to split yourself into 50,000 different profiles? It doesn't make any sense. And this is one of the issues I talk about Gambia. This is not exclusive of Age of Empires 2. It's just a phenomenon that happens in mostly every online game these days. Perhaps you'll see more in trendy games like Marvel Rivals or Valorant or Fortnite, but it's the issue of smurfing. And smurfing, it has nothing to do with that movie of Smurfs. That's just another way to discredit, like let's apply the term in context. Smurfing specifically in gaming, it doesn't refer to those blue little creatures in the fantasy world. That's not it. So smurfing is like the practice of experienced players who are using their experience to bash and to just steamroll players who have much lesser experience. What happens is that In competitive systems, let's say, I don't know how it works exactly in Mark Rivals, but I will speak from the experience of Age of Empires. In the so-called ranked, there is an unranked and there is a ranked. The purpose of the ranked system is basically to allow players to be matchmaked against players with similar skill levels. This is the theory. This is the theory. So what happens is that when a profile is created, like they get a standard rate, a standard number that is attributed to it, and according to the victories or defeats, then that number swings up or down. Uh, so far, also in theory, it sounds good. So ideally, you would think, okay, the player then who would get the most wins, then eventually would get the highest elo, because that's how the that number system is. And the player who gets the least gets the lowest elo. But besides just that number classification, what matters is that ideally you will find players in that kind of bracket that have the same similar skill levels of play. So imagine if there is a player who rises to 2K, he will face ideally players who have 2K skill levels. And if there are players who just go down to 300 or 200, I don't say, but for example, it's no shame, then they will face players also within those skill levels. So also in theory, this makes sense. That is totally fine. The problem is when in practice, it's not what happens, and worse, it's the very opposite. In practice, what not just is happening, but has been happening for years, and I just been piling that in the smirking videos, which are there in the YouTube channel. I'm not going to take them away, by the way. They're very fine. I love them all. I love them all. They're pretty good, and I intend to keep them. So concerning those situations, what happens is that the higher ranked players, uh, they are abusing the system. How? How exactly are you abusing the system? Because there is a way the system can be abused. And if a system can be abused, I guarantee you, considering that most people, human nature, are fallible and corrupt or evil, some of them, they will also tend to replicate those things. They will do those very things, unfortunately. Yet that is the truth. And I've been seeing that in the video games. What happens, for example, if a 2K, a 2.9K player decides to create, let's say, 20 new profiles. They all start with the base elo of 1000, I suppose. They have a base elo. It could be 900, it could be 1000. Okay, it's created with that. And what they do, these players, is that they will create a string of artificial defeats where, for example, they quit on game start, they disconnect on game start, or after 2 or 3 minutes, they just disconnect so that they forcefully lose the matches. And these new profiles, they keep downgrading. So uh, let's say I'm player Mr. Idiot. Let's just call the player Mr. Idiot, right? Player Mr. Idiot is a Smurf profile created by, for example, a player which is, let's call him Specialist. So Specialist is the name of the main account of that 2.9K player, decides to just Smurf. And that is to get some very easy wins and to bash noobs or bash new players who have no experience, or to just artificially deflate potential competitors, deflate their elo, just lower their elo artificially. So what he does, he said, okay, I'm seeing that there are these players in the 700 elo brackets, and they are starting to get very good. They're starting to get too good, and I don't like them. I really don't like them. I don't want them to rise. So what do they do? This specialist creates a new profile, or creates actually, for example, 10 different profiles. One of these profiles uh, is uh, is called Mr. Idiot, and Mr. Idiot starts with like the starting base elo, which will be like, let's say, 1K or 900 elo. And because he wants to forcefully matchmake against a player that is 700 elo, what does he do? Of course, 700, 900, there's discrepancy, and most likely he will not be matchmaking against such players, right? Unless for some theoretical reasons he queues for like 2 or 3 days nonstop, and the two would both agree on those times, okay? But we will talk about also the the fact how the queuing system can be exploited in other ways. Um, so let's say that 900, 700, theoretically, it's not easily possible because there's a lot of people within those yields, and there's no way for the match to take place there. So what does the player does? What does Mr. This the profile that owns Mr. Idiot, that is the specialist, what does he do? He will downgrade his profile. He will forcefully lose games, like quitting on game start. And by quitting on game start, his elo will probably go down 15 points each time he quits, each time he resigns, like on after 5 minutes, or he just either he quits on game start or very shortly after. Either way, he just wants to lose his elo. He wants to downgrade his elo into a 700-ish range tire. And let's say after a streak of like 8 or 10 consecutive forced losses, where a player resigns instantly on game start or within 3 to 5 minutes, he just decides to okay, now I'm basically 690 elo, and at this point I can matchmake against a player with 700 elo. The player he wants to snipe, or the group of players he wants to snipe. That's within range, and without any further manipulation, without any further changing, the 690 player and the 700 player, if they're both online at the same time, they will get matchmates. More than likely. There's a very strong likelihood of 90%. That's exactly what he was aiming for. What this specialist, also known as the owner of Mr. Idiot profile, was aiming for. Now let's call our targeted 700 player um, cheated. Let's call him cheated because that's exactly what it is. It's about cheating and rigging a game out. And so this player, this 700 called cheated, he's just playing normally. He thinks that okay, I want to have a chance to improve at this game. He was used to be like, for example, 500, so he continued to climb and attempting to go up. And the game starts with that 690 player called Mr. Idiot. So far, so good. Everything looks unsuspicious. But after a while, after like 6 or 7 minutes, something doesn't add up. The score starts to become increasingly big. The score disparity between players starts to get too big. And after by like 7 or 8 minutes, you have a hyper quick aggression, some sort of thing that the player just cannot understand. Whoa, I've not seen this. The players here on this level, they've never do this. And by minute 15, it's steamrolled. And he's, what is this? And he's right, he was owned, because the player who was playing against him was never 690 in terms of skill players. His real skill was 2.9k, 2900. So from the 690 to 2090, 700, so like it's almost, it's more than 4 times. It's more than 4 times a player that has 4 times the skill versus that that player, let's call him, the new player. He faces a player that is 4 times his skills. He was not playing against Mr. Idiot. He was playing against Specialist, who is 2.9k. So how can a player who is legitimately like 700 play against a player that declares a fake elo and is actually 2,900, like more than 4 times his skills and how many thousands more hours of gameplay? Obviously, but he thinks, okay, it was just a bad game. It was just a fault. It was just this account. So he continues to queue again. And the problem is that this specialist, he has not just one profile. He has 20 other profiles. One is like 690, the other is 680, the other 670. So that the point is that each time the player, let's say the cheated player queues, he will end up being matchmaked against him, kind of. So after the second game, like he will be, let's suppose, the former 700 player is now 688 or 685, let's say, and he gets matched against the new profile of specialist at 680. And you already can see the cycle going down, 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 down. And that is the point. It's a way to deliberately target the elo of players. It's a way to bash and bully those players. Of course, the player will not have any chance. The point is that he doesn't get any chance. It's not just to rig the game, it's just to cancel or just bully the player. And yeah, I've had that kind of thing happening. I don't mean it's just directed towards me, but I've seen other players as well, and they complain about the same Smurf problem. And this is a recurring issue we face in Age of Empires. Like that's the Smurfing problem, where the competition is being rigged by those in top. So like 1% of players is creating, I don't know, like 60 or 70% of new profiles, and they're constantly bashing the lower elos and artificially pushing the players to a much lower elo than their actual elo should be, because they don't want competition. So it's like a match fixed system, and but it's even worse than that. It's not just not wanting to have certain players to rise and even to force them, to punish them down. It's also a means to, they also rig in reverse. How do you rig in reverse? You rig in reverse by, let's say, now that's a specialist. What happens is that specialist, let's say, he has, we'll make a very absurd case, but to see that the point is, specialist has a very good looking girlfriend, or a very good looking friend, and he wants to have that very good looking friend to go as much as possible because she's good looking and he's trying to get his way. He's just trying to get his advantage, and he's going to use those gaming skills as a means to step ahead of the rest. So what he will do, he starts talking with that, a very new player, very good looking, doesn't know how to play very well. It doesn't matter, but very good looking. So they go and they say, okay, we'll do the following. I'll make you good at this game. Don't worry, don't worry. And what they do is that they create different profiles, and they will make sure, like in the previous case, that they get matchmaked against the, let's say it, cute looking. So every time you face the cute looking, he's going to make sure the games are easy for the cute looking. Like they will play less. They will play far less than their usual because that's what I call the reverse smurfing. It can be with any others, but it's this is just an extreme case so that you gain understanding of what's going on. Because if you cannot take action if you cannot know what's going on. That's why I'm doing it, like just inform. Um, So basically, that kind of, let's say, good looking gets matchmaked against like specialists using, I don't know how to play this game. Like he uses a profile called I don't know how to play this game. So cute looking plays against I don't know how to play this game, and the game becomes easy for someone who like watches the game again. This game is too easy. Like the player is not being very aggressive. Why is he? Why is the game too easy? When I play, the games are so impossible, and why does this guy's just making it too easy? Reverse smurfing. Reverse smurfing. When you deliberately want certain people to just rise up, not out of competency, but because you want to determine who gets up. So what you do is that you either resign from a certain point or you don't play as aggressively as the other player to intentionally let the other player go up. So it's a way to match fix the game, but in the other way around. So in the same way that some players are pushed back and punished because they're very good, they don't want them to rise enough. Players who are either mediocre or because they have an advantage or because they're friends or because there is some advantage they can gain from the higher elo player, what do? They get systematically queued with that player, but that player will always play less. And even some might even stream, I don't know, but the game feels too easy. The game feels too easy and it's not representative that other offline players face for other offline players without any particular advantage. And yes, I believe that there's match fixing in that kind of way because you see people who are getting too easy games and just piling up elos and they don't have that competency. They just keep rising because let me just think. friends are queuing with them. Yes, friends are queuing with them so they can easily rise. Or friends or benefited friends, I don't care. There is some sort of benefit or advantage to be gained. And other players are grinding. I don't say all players up there are not green. Of course, everyone is some are green, but not everyone. Not everyone is greening. Some are grinding at the expense of others. And that's the problem. They're rigging the system in their favor. They're match fixing. They're making what should be accessible games impossible and what should be harder games too easy. That's match fixing in two ways, right? So it's cheating. It's one of the reasons why I am against this smurfing. And I also don't like reverse smurfing because of that. You know, the reverse smurfing, like you're trying to push up certain friends just because you are friends with them instead of playing normally, you know, and that's just not fair. That's it's a double unfairness. It's like a double unfair because not only you are pushing your friends up, like for example, a corrupt hiring process in a corrupt organization, like you have all the candidates and they display like the perfect resumes, the perfect things, but you are not going to select that. You're going to select the candidate who you deem to be the perfect, not the perfect candidate, the candidate that you want others think is perfect. And that's a problem. You're going to rig the system so that uh, more qualified candidates are seen as less qualified candidates and so on and so forth. And this is where it starts. And the problem is also that you're pushing down players who have skills and competency. And this is a way to target these players. Let's not lie about that because either because they don't like competition, these high low players, and they want to keep like viewers or something. So they want to make these potential competitors as invisible and as dismissive as possible. They just want to make sure that okay, they have lesser chance because we're going to bash them. It's a bit like in an industry of major players who are determining whoever can come in the industry. And nobody can come in the industry if they're not kind of like sponsoring them. It's a way of not just control, but to stop any potential competitors. And that's wrong. That's match fixing. It's just violating competition rules. This is one of the reasons why I stand against this kind of thing called match fixing and gaming and I guess the smurfing thing. And I think it's important that as a gamer or that we have ethics, otherwise we become empty, we become hollow and shallow. Uh, don't be like some of the gamers I play where when I know I deliberately confront them for smurfing and they either don't reply, they laugh in your face, they just dismiss everything. Everything in life is dismissive. It's related. Everything is related. And it just gives such a bad impression to people who are either interested in the game, they want to learn, they see that. They get uh they get a very bad vibe from these kinds of behaviors. So I say that, like any functional organism, you need to regulate and stop these kinds of behaviors. Like at least hunt down the match fixers and bring some clarity because there is match fixing everywhere. It's plain obvious. Some even admit to smurfing into like different profiles. They even boast their accounts and they even sell their smurfing accounts. It's just disgusting. Anyway, these are, you might call it lateral topics, but I like to talk about them because they influence the outcome of gamers. And many of the dudes that just are online, they either quit playing, they stop playing because of these match fixing issues. So I cannot understand how these issues are not as important as others. These are the main issues. Like according to certain statistics, for example, if this is correct, at least 75 to 80% of players from Marvel Rivals have stopped playing, because of the smurfing issue in that game. But the smurfing issue is like general into other games. It's not just specific to Marvel Rivals. I've mentioned Fortnite. I mentioned as well there's Valorant, there's Marvel Rivals, Age of Empires. You name it. Any player or any kind of competition where you see a one versus one, you'll have those things, or team games. Even for example, in Dota 2, you have the smurfing issue. And in Dota 2, the you know that they were at least one of the earliest games to take stance against smurfing. That doesn't mean smurfing is not taking place right now. Of course, it still is taking place, but they are like heavily monitoring every time. And I tell you, these Smurf account creators, they just don't stop. They continue create and create. They continue to evade norms and evade norms and evade norms. They just try to evade the system. You put them a ban. They create another profile. They create. So I think that it's time to have robust identity checks, and that we start to have like heavy measures against people abusing the system. Because God damn it, if thousands of people are starting to be resentful because when they're going to play the game, it's going to be rigged against them. I mean, it puts everyone angry. It doesn't put the Smurf angry, of course. That narcissist piece of Smurf is not going to complain against that. The cancer doesn't complain that he's a cancer, of course. But the rest, everyone else is complaining. They might not do vocal streams about that, but they complain in their private when they're in their computer. Say, "Oh, fuck this shit. What is this game? I'm tired of this game. Screw it." And you see that, you see that, and I understand that point of view because I've been there as well. I just have a few extras, but that's it. I also have faced the same kind of reaction and attitude, and obviously I don't like it. I don't like it. Like, we need to make this as inclusive as possible. And this means we need to take stance against people who are manipulating games. Like in any sport, if you got match fixers, the game becomes dirty, nobody likes it. And everybody starts to just punch each other. That's exactly what it's going to do. If you start to mistrust so much a system, then you can believe people will just rebel against it. And if you want to rebel, to force people to rebel so that you can act against, they will continuously act and act. So kudos on you if you want provocation. Uh, I'm just pointing you what it is. And yeah, this was a first topic, concerning gaming. And now I kind of like might switch to other things like events. Um, well, I could call it events, but it also could be like news affected stuff. Now, for example, we could talk about this is kind of related to not more necessarily politics, but more policy. It's actually more accurate to use the policy term. Uh, like there's been a lot of fuss about these tariffs. These tariffs, I think, are the major cause behind what I believe is a global recession that has been taking place. And I say that without any kind of problem. I mean, there are other problems as well. So you see, for example, the oil prices they're going slopey down. They're just plummeting. To some extent, it also can be good, but when it starts to go too down, it signals that there is like a global downturn. You start to get it below or within $50, it signals that something is not going well. Now, of course, you might think, okay, it's cheap gas, huh? Right? It's cheap gas. So what is this dude telling me? The dude is telling you that if the oil starts sloping, just going down too low, it probably means that uh, you're not getting buyers. So imagine that you're in a store and you used to have your customers, and what happens now is that you're starting to see less people coming on the store each time. Where you had like 200 customers, now you're lucky if two or three appear. Not two or three, but let's say you're lucky if 25 appear within a week, and you start to get worried. Say, what am I doing wrong, etc. Well, what else can I be doing to improve this? And you realize that it's because they don't have the purchasing power they had. So there is this trend. You'll start to see, you probably, the data, obviously the economic data is always prehistorically lagging late. You'll only see what happens like economically, like 1 plus year, or actually 6 plus months after things start happening, which is even worse. Because then you're led to an impression that, oh, but the previous data showed that we still were not in recession. We're kind of okay. And it's not the case. What's been happening is that I believe there's been a huge slowdown. And like I say, the oil prices, you can see a fall in some car sales, all these things. People probably either not traveling as before, not eating as much as before. They're starting to be savvy where they used to be spendy or a bit more spendy. Some patterns just start to align, that it means that we're definitely not in the coldest of times. And then we start to understand, so what exactly happened? Because, the economy just got kaboomed. Well, besides the wars, because yes, there are wars ongoing, uh, these wars actually should drive like inflation and the prices up. Of course, the armaments, the industry, the materials, everything goes up as a result of conflicts. Yes, they do. But you also have other shocks. You also have the tariff shocks. That's like one of the most recent things that has been done this year, particularly since a specialist, not another kind of specialist, came to policy, and his specialist teams of specialists within a specialist party, they decided that placing tariffs on anything outside is going to be good. And he sells that to the masses. Tariffs equals good, equals brilliant. And I tell you, this kind of equality is bound for disaster. Now, I think like the premise of this is you start, you want to increase the production, and you got like the tariffs and the American tariffs. You want to tariff outside, potential imports, so that the ideal is that the most simplistic reason for the tariffs is okay, if an outside product enters the US and it's more expensive than a US made product, then the consumers will not buy or will stop buying the outside made product, and they will choose the US made version of that kind of product. Or at least you will be incentivized to buy local, to buy a US product. And or eventually to say, okay, but you cannot produce such a version in local US kind of markets. So yeah, we know that. So the point is to blackmail the producer of such things outside, who's producing, I don't know in which country. Is could be China, it could be Taiwan, it could be what, it could be Vietnam, it could be any other country. And the idea or place, um, the idea is to force these manufacturers to bring down the production back to to the kind of market, so like to the US in that case. So and then the idea is, oh, if you have your industries here, if you're producing here, then you can sell your stuff here, and then you'll not be having tariffs. Okay, this in principle it sounds very interesting, but this is like you're openly declaring an economic war against anyone else, because you're saying if you just everyone brings their industries here, will not be tariffed, and everybody else will be tariffed. So it's just like saying they'll be losing. They will always be bound to lose if they're not here. And are you going to unindustrialize every other country because you want to industrialize yourself and screw the rest? It's a dangerous approach that you think that you can own the entire industrial property and the rest of the world screw it. That kind of mentality where I can bully others and the others will not react is dangerous. So dangerous for them. And obviously, what happens with the tariffs is that other countries, they're retaliating. So they decided to place counter tariffs. And you blame them for placing counter tariffs after you bullying them with tariffs? No, it's the logic. You punch, I kick you, and now you complain that I kick you. No, it's the logic, tit for tat, or tat for tit. Some people just cannot understand that, or they refuse to understand that because of domestic reasons or corruption, which is also one of the reasons I like to address. Like, it doesn't matter, the elections you get in the political systems, particularly in the US, like they're completely useless at this time. People are just voting for, one A or two B. It's A or B, but the kind of policy it's similar. They're looking at the face, they're looking at the person, but they're not looking at the policy. They're not looking at the things that are not sexy. And this is a real problem. They're looking at what's immediate, what it's like straight. Let's make this great. They listen to very uh, shallow slogans instead of listening to the what to rationality and to what functions. They only listen to what feels good. And if you if you if you orientate your life towards what feels good, you're not going to go to right place. You're just not. You're just not. Like in my experience, of course, I don't live life in easy mode. On the contrary, uh, I've been like I learned that it's dangerous if you think in your bubble. If you continuously think that it's the opinion of your friends, that is going to inform your opinion. You're dangerous. It's dangerous for you if you try to live under that kind of conditionality. It's worse than the Matrix because in the Matrix it's a movie, you laugh about it, but uh, this kind of thing it's even worse because you don't even want to see it. So you become biased because for example, when elections come, you go for the straight decisions, you go for things that appear sound bites, you go for what appears interesting. You go for, those trendy things, and you don't go for something that is far more lasting. It might not look as appealing. It might look like, I don't know, the broccoli you see, but it's that kind of things that ensure stability on the long term. It's the kind of things that make sense. And like obviously I'm not in the US, but I will not collude myself from making any kind of considerations for what takes place there. There's no political police here. There's no political police here, of course, in Europe. And from that European perspective, we are completely entitled, and I will enforce that. Like we definitely look and we criticize things that are not right. And those tariffs, for me, they're pathetic. They're pathetic. But they're not just pathetic. They're evil. They're evil. It's just a way to bully others. It's just a way to let's crush the others so that we say we are the only ones who stay. And lots of businesses already have been affected because of the tariffs. They stopped exporting. They started firing people, laying off people. But of course, whoever applied the tariffs doesn't give shit. The narcissism is what matters. The me is the more important thing, and the me. It's always about the narcissism. Money buys elections in that state. I'm completely convinced. Um, I also, I also firmly believe that those elections were not free and fair. Uh, Now you might say, but nobody said that. No, they were not. They were not free and fair because in free and fair elections, I don't see how somebody who's been convicted, for there were felonies and other things can be just running for an office, like with corruptions and bribes. It's something that, as an European, for me, does not make sense. Maybe it makes sense from somebody who just says the economy, but for me, it doesn't. And these things, they're not even strange, they're alienish. They're alienish, but in a hostile way. And there are more things that we can say about, of course. Now many countries just started to make their own counter tariffs because of the stupid tariff war that has started by that new administration, that the new American administration, which I believe doesn't represent most Americans' interests, not at least in the cities, not at least in what I call the the more liberal democratic spaces. because the US is like it's not the same thing. It's you may call it US, but I think that it's far from United. It's not that. There's there are different perceptions, and I believe that you know you might call it bipartisan or not, but for me, like the so-called the blue states and the red state, that's very real. And one of the things that's like were shockers in that kind of election, but of course, some corrupt commentators don't talk about that, maybe because they're bribed or they like to just call you dumb. It's kind of weird that one candidate gets seven of those non-blue, non-red states all in once. It never happened, but now it happens. Something that never happened now starts to happen. Like this election process in like 200 years, and only now you get in a single election a guy who has seven of those states. Of course, there was rigging, there was vote fraud, and it's not difficult to know the math doesn't add up. Votes that just were thrown to the trash, others that were burned. But like the candidate that conceded, they didn't care. They were so quick in conceding that for me it means like okay, they were not combative on purpose. They they know that the election was rigged, but they were too they lacked the strength to challenge that. Even if they know they were rigged, they didn't want to challenge that. So it makes it even worse. So the people who eventually did vote for other options, they feel betrayed because why? So we voted to oppose this, and the candidate just concedes like that, not even without giving a fight. That's the strange part. To concede without giving a fight, to just believe the lies that you're told. And because of all of that, we got to this tariff situation. The tariffs and the economic consequences you're now seeing are the result of those petty decisions of not be willing to fight since November. Now you might think November is like 6 months ago. I don't care. No, no. It's exactly because of those decisions that you are starting to feel. And it's just going to get worse. It's just going to get worse. So was it the previous president? Because the previous president, the egg prices were going up. Was it the previous president? Oh, now he's not there. Also, now it's not the previous president. But are you still going to find which blame now? You're going to continue the blame game of silly stupidities, of silly stupidity after silly stupidity? Like you just try to bribe the electors. It's just something I cannot fathom or understand. You create lotteries of million dollars for voters to register. They just have to say they believe in this, and they're entitled to earn $1 million in some kind of raffle. No, no, that's corruption. That's corruption, dude. You might not call it corruption, but you're corrupt as shit. That's corruption. And yeah, it sickens me to see those things in the United States. So for me, the US is not even democracy. It's not democracy. It's an authoritarian state. And frankly, I'm kind of like disappointed by the things I see there. And I see it frankly. I don't say it, oh, okay, yeah, I'm supposed to defend US. No, I'm not. So I even find it's kind of un-American considering their constitutions, the kind of things I'm seeing. Um, just police just storming on random houses. Uh, a police that looks like a political police. They call it the ICE. It's there, and they raid and storm. They storm people's houses. They detain arbitrarily. They arbitrarily send them to detention camps and just ban them without any due cause. There was also that incident of of migrants who got illegally expelled. They got illegally expelled because then they challenged the decision for the administration to deport them. Those decisions they went to court. The court said, of course, that person is a legal citizen. He should remain in the soil. And still, the administration, that illegal administration, they deported them. So they decided to just overrule the judiciary system. It doesn't matter what the judge said. The administration did the opposite. And of course, it was, I don't know if it was in El Salvador or those in those countries, that 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 migrant, he decided to continuously challenge that the U.S. administration for the illegal deportation, and again, the court ordered the administration to pay for the expenses and to send, to force that citizen who was illegally expelled to be returned to the U.S. So it's just this doesn't make any sense. A state that doesn't obey the law, that says the law is what I want, I don't care about the rest. And yes, that's disappointing. So while some are only looking at the tariffs war and they just care about the economical issues, we understand that there are more implications, the social implications about all that. And the people will say, okay, yes, but we cannot let them all in. We cannot let them all in. It's not the question of who comes in, or it's not the question of not letting people in. It's the kind of what you decide under which reasons you decide to ban. Because you don't like their faces, because you don't like their politics, because you don't like how they look, because you think that they can. That's kind of this kind of bias cannot take place. Understandably, a country like they have the right to protect themselves against people who like come because they want to commit terrorist actions or because they want to just commit acts of violence. That's perfectly fine. Or people who don't want to abide by the norms and the customs of that territory. So let's say they cannot you you cannot I don't know like do something there. You cannot drink or party. I don't know something stupid. You cannot do that. And the thing is that these people refuse to respect those rules, to respect the customs, to respect traditions. They're also, of course, because they don't want to integrate. They don't want to be compatible, let's say, with this kind of people. Another thing is if you're just trying to bash these people out and you're just trying to make up excuses under political guise, under social reasons, under personal hatred. You're just trying to fabricate reasons to expel those people. And obviously, that's disgusting. That's exactly, it's Gestapoish. It's Gestapoish. It's kind of what I believe is taking place like in the US. A lot of like people have stopped traveling there from Europe. They have stopped traveling from Europe there, and it's a signal. They don't view it as well. They don't like to be called the bad guys by the Americans. They don't guy. They don't. Uh, the tremendous level of hostility of bigotry that I see from like the American side, the American administration. That's just unfathomable, and I don't like it. I don't like it. It's not just that the world deserves better. We don't have to deal with that shit. And there was again another thing about that administration, not just about the tariffs, not just about the deportations, the illegal deportations, by the way, it's not just deportations, the illegal deportations, the overruling of judges, the fact that they needed to punish judges, to persecute and prosecute judges. It's amazing the kind uh, of hatred that you see towards the state of law. It's just like the dismantling of the rule of law of everything, like in Nazi Germany, like in Nazi Germany. I say it like it's 1933, 1938 revisited. If you don't want to revisit history because you hate history, I give a fuck about you. It's just what it is. Uh, Knowledge doesn't depend on your acceptance of it, so screw you. And yeah, it's that. Basically, we're facing like a turbulent world because of it. Then there is this threat of, oh, now I'm going to call, I'm going to this state can be the 51st, and this one can be also the 50%. You make imperialistic threats, you threaten the sovereignty, the territorial integrity of other states, and you think it's okay? I would not see it in good eyes. Like Canada felt threatened, Denmark felt threatened. That's it. These states just respond in proportion. It's not because you're big that they will not face you. I don't try to understand if you provoke something into action, the other part will have to react. Maybe you know that. Maybe you want that reaction or not. I don't care, but that's just how it works. It's a little return, tit for tat. And I think that kind of imperialism that you see in these policies is just detrimental for everyone. It's something like you start to threat your allies and your former friends with economic like downturns, with tariffs, with threats. This is just not it. That you don't do that to allies, you don't do that to friends. Now, from like what I understood from like recent news or developments, now the US made a small tariff deal with the UK. So what? Are you sure that in the UK you want to eat chlorinated chicken? I don't think the government represents the people there. I don't think the people there want to eat chlorinated chicken. I don't think they're okay with their food standards being lowered so much to degenerate standards. I don't think the people, in fact, in the UK wanted to leave the European Union. And I even think that concerning that thing which is called like the Brexit, it was a fraud. And a lot of people who voted for that were actually senior voters who are dead. And many of the so-called people who are facing the Brexit consequences, the youngsters, they could not vote at a time. They never could cast a vote. So why should they be bound by something which they never were given a chance to vote? Why are you enslaving these generations that first never wanted Brexit? They just wanted to remain within the European Union bloc trade and the European Union with its right and obligation. It's not just trade, there's rights and there's obligations. You just can't have your cake and eat it. So there's like those British say, oh yeah, let's get back to you. We make a convenient deal. We get all the goods and we don't have obligations. No, everybody has to have obligations there. It's not a free for all. And it's something that people like don't want to understand or refuse. Like there's a certain set of rules. You say, oh yeah, dictatorship of Brussels. Are you sure? Do you want the dictatorship of the White House dictating what you're thinking, like in the food standards and the kind of regulations that should be indicated? They're completely dictated in the US. Do you want that? Strange. And the government is not even defending, in my opinion, it's not even defending those those interests of the population, like the farmers and the people there. They they want they want food standards to be respected within the European Union standards, not the other way around. They don't want to cancel 30 or 40 years of kinds uh, of progress towards a certain kind of standards to be erased by uh, just political corruption. That's not what they want. But eventually there will be like elections in the UK, and I'm more than sure that people will say their voice very clear and loud to the government to insist that the European Union is like the secondary or the last thing, and the US is like their friends. It's exactly the opposite. The people believe, the people in UK, like I have this perception, they believe that the future is within the EU, not within the US. But suddenly, strangely, that's not exactly what you hear from the government, the very opposite. But, to each his own. Again, it's also part of the problem. But as I say, even if the UK makes those tariff deals with the US, it doesn't mean that the others will make them. And even if you make deals like it, you're just placing yourself under blackmail. What if in the next day, uh, that guy comes with something else, something new tariff, another new shit? You can't rely on blackmail. On long-term trading, just cannot rely on blackmail. And it's something that obviously I would advise to, be cautious about that. So obviously, either other blocks will be formed, people will start, the blocks that before traded more with the US will start trading less with the US. And at the end of the day, who knows if the one who wants to isolate, which is the US, is the one who gets isolated. I mean, they started all this shit, so it's legitimate that they get the fallout from that. Anyway, these are about like the tariffs, and I think that those are useful topics because You probably think that the egg prices are a result of some president who is no longer in office, right? Because for you, life is such a simplistic. You press a button, guilt. This one is guilty. That's it. You don't even want to know if that's not the case. Understandable. But I tell you, it's far more than egg prices. And all of this is being driven. There's a lot of insanity in the White House, in my opinion. Uh, there's also like I remember like a few weeks ago there was like a press interview, and I saw the blatant xenophobia. Xenophobia, it's not about xenos, it's about uh, hatred towards foreigners. It's you want to use uh, a foreigner ethnicity or a foreigner's nationality as a means to attack that person. It's like, since you're not one of us, we can attack you, or you're different, so let's attack you because of nationality. And I felt that, there was a press conference. I don't know the subject, what it was. The journalist was questioning a an American representative there, from the government. One of those, I call them one of the puppets, of the government. They send somebody on the interview, and as soon as like the journalist, I think it was a BBC journalist, started to make like a question, and it was like an inquisitive question. So mid talk, while the journalist was framing the question, uh, the press conference direct, like the person from the White House, like, was the making the press. They just basically say, uh, which country are you from? They abruptly interrupted the journalist, so it's already a means to cancel their question. You cancel the journalist, say, which country you come from? Obviously diverting the question to something else. And the journalist obviously say, yeah, I'm from the UK. And instantly, this is the response. Like, I think it was a Marjorie Taylor, I don't know what, uh, just a very shitty person, in my opinion, to not call it even worse. They basically said, this is a press where I only answer to American journalists. So because the journalist who was making the question did not have the privilege of being born in the USA, in the United States of America, because they were from another country in the world, on the shithole that doesn't matter, right? Their questions were less interesting, and they could be more, they were not as interesting as an American journalist. And obviously, she was kind of shocked, but she continued to make, and the other just said, yeah, I didn't respond. Like, she was trying to bully her, to constantly bash her, and basically to silence that journalist. And at the time, first, yes, some journalists, of course, were surprised about that attitude, but what even shocked me, but negatively, was a certain laughter and a certain jeer I heard in that room, that press room. So instead of people, journalists even being, shocked and angry and outraged, they started to laugh and jeer about that. It's so. Do you think like that kind of discrimination is acceptable? It's already a you start crossing lines after lines, and we could be talking about how exactly those Nazi concentration and even the death camps came out. They didn't came on the first day. They came because gradually you started to make the lives of all these people, which were the Jews, which were Democrats, which were democratic people, left people or anarchists, even Slavs. They just tried to make the lives of these people as worse as possible, but on a very subtle curve, on a very subtle curve. So first they'll start to discriminate them. They say they then after some time they say they cannot have jobs, they cannot hold office, they cannot marry, they cannot even have children. They start to regulate bit by bit and to artificially cut and let these people as much closed as possible. It's like you're trying to cage them progressively, and it's exactly how it feels like, in that kind of U.S. crazy policy. Of course, there are the people who in the US, which either because of threats or something they cannot talk. Well, I say for that, there are other countries, and if you can, just hop out of it, and you probably will have much better freedom and opportunities elsewhere. And if you earn a lot of money in the US, maybe you might find a way to earn money outside. But to each his own. I just don't like what I'm seeing there, and it doesn't represent, the kind of ideals like that used to come from that side. So yes, there is disappointment as well. Uh, to say another thing, um, concerning that press. Okay, after that press event, then the journalists, of course, did not answer. They did not let that British journalist to make the question. So immediately after that, Marjorie, I don't know what, gave the word to another journalist, which was an American journalist. And well, what a shame. The American journalist then made the same question that the British journalist. They said, "I'm making the question that the other journalist was making." And then she obviously was melting down. She was starting to now acting like a complete Karen. Of course, uh, it was hilarious. At least it was hilarious at that point. But at least you know it felt like it was being challenged. It was a New York journalist, a New York Post journalist at the time. I don't remember. And no, I'm not a journalist. I don't give a shit about those things. But I just talk about at least things that mark me. It's like okay, so the truth is not what that Marjorie was trying to frame up. And it was good because obviously then the journalist felt okay. I was not alone in that kind of fight. It was like she had a legitimate question. I don't remember the kind of question, but in any case, she was being disrupted in her job. So obviously, very arrogant from that kind of administration to police the journalists, because don't tell me that this is not dictated by the upper dude. Of course, everything is orchestrated by the upper dude, or with at least with the connivancy of that dude. And it's sad that you allow um, countries and policies to be captured by complete demagogues and individuals who, you know, because of their wealth, they can buy and corrupt anything. That's exactly what it feels like. It's dirty. Understandably, I know, like I can say this from very clear perspective. Many Americans even refrain from using the term politics because of reprisals. And just like in the Nazi Germany of 1933, you definitely are not safe there. And it's also something that shocks me that the academics, the scientists, the people who even, like career-wise, not just because of money, mercenaries, but because career-wise they worked, they graduated, eventually they got opportunities, they got out of their countries, and they went there to work, to make science. Those who really want to make science, and they're baffled with intrigues, um, the need to politically control um, deans to politically control uh, a politically correct language in academia. And if they don't stick to that kind of language, if they don't stick to those policies concerning gender policy, concerning migration, or something like that, if there is any little stain, any little thing which they instantly get ousted from their jobs, they get fired, and worse, they get defunded, they you cannot do science, you cannot work normally if you are under constant threats, neither in academia, neither in science. And obviously, yes, there's opportunities in Europe for scientists and the people who want to just try to restart because I tell you, it doesn't. From inside the US, I don't know how it looks like, but from outside, it doesn't make any sense what's taking place there. And I believe that some people in the US can be like the frog that is boiling in water. It's boiling very slowly, like the frog doesn't realize, but the water is just getting warmer and warmer, like it's boiling. It's eventually going to reach boiling point. And by the time it does, well, the frog is already cooked. And I believe that many of those are like Americans, they're also trapped in that kind of bubble because they're just not, maybe not we witnessing completely. They're witnessing some effects, but I don't say the aberration of so many things that are taking place there from outside, it's even worse. But this is a perspective from an outside dude, and I frankly am kind of like disappointed with the things I see there. And yeah, don't worry, I'm not interesting to, just go to the US to be arrested because that's apparently how you like to deal. You like to arrest people there uh, without due process of law. You even deport them illegally. You do all those things. Amazing. Uh, we just don't have these things in Europe, fortunately. But I think the US still tries to bully time and time again. And, concerning also the US, like, they're kind of bickering in the NATO alliance when they start say, okay, now now you have to spend like 2% or 5% of GDP. Now you have to spend all this percent of GDP. Who are they to make these demands? Or is this a way and a trick to say, oh, so if you don't do this, then we just back off. If you want to backstab or betray, no excuses will cut out the betrayal or the backstabbing. It's plainly obvious. Now, obviously, some countries had more capacity. They have more capacities than others, and eventually, with time, they do catch up. But to just say 5% for a rich country is the same as 5% for a non-rich country, you're just shitting. Okay, like 5%, it seems nothing, but it depends on the kind of cake you're talking. Are you talking about like a Germany? Are you talking about France? Or are you talking about like, for example, like an Ireland? And say in Ireland, uh, you could say Portugal. You could say Slovenia. You could say Croatia. What kind of eh, percentages doesn't say anything. 5% of 10 billion is not the same as 5% of 1 billion. Not the same. And it's these kinds of demagogy and lies in the public stage that I just can't fathom it. It's just it's not illiteracy, it's just pure insulting. And for me, that kind of attitude just creates even more retaliation. So I would definitely say that these are the troubling events that we've been seeing since, especially since that so-called administration changed. Of course, now there are other conflicts, like there's the war in the east of Europe, right, between Ukraine and Russia. You know who invaded who and who started who. Obviously, Russia invaded. They call it that operation, the military operation. Ukraine calls that an invasion, and it is an invasion. It was an invasion, and obviously they keep occupying, you know, illegally annexing parts of Ukraine. And Ukraine obviously just voicing that point of view, vows to use all the means that it has for legitimate defense and to establish its sovereignty and territorial integrity. Now, it might look a state dispute, but it is what it is. And each state, like just like a person, they have like the right to defend themselves. Yes, then there are the crimes and the so-called war crimes and tit for tat, all those things. But originally, it started in February 2022. Russia decided to start that adventure, and it became, what it was. Uh, Now, personally, so if you want to blame the two for fighting, if you say, oh yeah, they're fighting because it's the fault of Ukraine that doesn't want peace, no, there was a country who invaded another, and it all started from there. And then there was the war crimes, there is the aggression, there's all those dirty things that are taking place, and even kidnappings of journalists, and God knows even more horrible things that I'm not even going to shed here. Not because I'm afraid, because they're just disgusting, they're scumbag. But these things have been taking place, unfortunately. First there was like silence from the West, like, okay, yeah, we support Ukraine, but there was no tangible. Now, of course, they are providing that kind of support, but in the beginning, it was very difficult to get people on board. You still have, you know, states which are obviously, uh, I would call them moles, the moles of Russia infiltrated in Europe. Like you got that Orban and from Hungary, you got that Fico from Slovakia. They're basically Russian puppets. They're complete Russian puppets. They're bribed by Russia. They're corrupt by Russia, and nothing that happens in those countries happens without the knowledge of obviously the Russian. And obviously Europe defends against that, right? That's the reason why they see Ukraine as the big deal. Now, I'm not placing blame on I'm not commenting on the perspective of the ideologues of the Russia. I don't care about those ideologues. You can just that crappy shit. I'm just commenting from the view of European perspective. And some probably don't consider Europe, okay, it's not a country, it's not that. There's different countries, and yeah, right. You continue to just look at the world map of just USA, China, Russia, USA, China, Russia. Continue to just look at those three, and there's nothing else in the world. You're not going to go far away. So all these things, they pile up for the current situation. And that brings again to the economy and the inflation. Because of that war, these, of course, the prices, the oil prices, and every other associated prices that has been going up, up, the cost of living going up, and not, obviously the salaries are not keeping up. So eventually that war touches and reaches your pocket. It hurts, it bleeds your pocket. So to say that that war was very far away, I don't give a shit about those who are killing themselves. Yeah, right. But fleas on your pocket, and obviously it has these effects. Now it has been causing, along with other things like these tariffs, so much disruption in the economy that now you see like a recession. So people basically they're not as spendy, they're not as buying as before, and this brings to the economic problem because of the war, of that war. And to pile up, there's tensions in the Middle East, usual tensions. You see, like in the Red Sea, there's that those Houthi pirates, and there's the eternal war between the century wars between the Palestine, Israel, Palestine, and you know, first it's okay, then let's Israel says let's exterminate what is Hamas, but then Hamas even after Gaza is completely in shambles and completely in ruins with like thousands of civilians killed, not just terrorists. Of course, there might be terrorist groups and terrorist activities, but eventually the civilians, of course, the civilians die too, right, of those bombings. And then it gives an impression that now the conflict is kind of solved because there was a ceasefire and the Palestinians can just get back to their homes. Fine. They get back to their homes, but what kind of homes? It's everything in shambles. And now, there you go with the reconstruction again. It will take time. And because the Palestinians suffered this kind of violence from the bombings and the shelling and all that brutality from Israel, then eventually a potential generation of fanatics is going to be constructed for the next 10 years with even more hatred developed towards that Israeli, and they want to eventually take action against them. And we start the spiral of violence all over again. And you probably will create a situation of, I don't know, I don't say I want that, of course I don't want, but it can lead to a potential terrorist attack like the October the 7th. The very same thing that started like the war, so that like it was 1 or 2 years ago, I think that's October the 7th, it was uh, that that attack on those festivals, on that music festivals that was being held in Israel. And obviously the killings, the kidnappings, the murder, the brutality, the butchery, the usual thing of terrorism, because obviously it's to inflict fear. Then, which was by Hamas, of course, and the other proxy groups associated. And then Israel used that, they wanted to retaliate. Because of that, of course, they retaliated, but then they always retaliated like 10 times more. So it created that spiral of violence that Palestinians just it was like the carpet bombing of Gaza, also Lebanon. It was you never get a way out of these tangly situations. It's just more violence generates more violence. Now I don't say one side has more reason than the other. This is a different case than the Ukraine and Russia war because in the Russia-Ukraine war, Russia started that they were completely out and separated. That it was just a political gamble and I say arrogance, Agamemnon style move, but with arrogance. And at least in the Palestine and Israel situation, it's more like centuries of decade-lasting conflict, and obviously it's not going to get solved any soon. There might be tons more of academic texts and writings and reportings and comments. There will always be something to talk about those issues, Middle Eastern. Ones might say, okay, it's control of territory because land is scarce there, because water is scarce, and everybody is disputing um, the scarce resources, the land, the minerals, the population areas, the urban centers, and it's also one of the reasons. So, because obviously that zone in the Middle East was always, unfortunately, there was prone to conflicts. Like I said, there was greed. There's a lot of different things at stake there. But let's just say, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. I don't see a way out from it, and the simplest and a formal easier way out would be to have those two-state solution. And because those two people have been there in that land since eternally. And a two-state solution with moderate authorities might be the path forward. But strangely, the extremists on each of the sides are not interested in that kind of solution, and that's why you see this perpetuation of violence cycle. First, it's Israel that bombs either Palestine attacks, not Palestine, the Hamas or another group attacks Israel. The resistance attacks the Palestinian resistance, so they attack Israeli or Israeli associated targets, and then Israel bombs back, and it continues the spiral of violence. Again, I don't speak from an Israeli or a Palestinian point of view. It's just outside European. But it's what we see. And obviously this inflation, the economy you see, obviously it's all about the economy. It's also interfered because of this Israel-Palestinian conflict and the Houthi war. Then obviously there's the Iran business also. It's a dirty little business there. Now there were threats. Israel. There's been this more subtle tit for tat, where Iran not supposed to like Iran, Israel doesn't want Iran to proliferate or develop the nuclear weapons. They say like it's the red line. Israel, obviously, for existential reasons, they don't want Iran like it's the termed our co-enemy. The same goes for Iran. They don't want vis-a-vis Israel. They don't want Iran to have like the nuclear weapons, understandably, because if they're used, imagine if they would use those, and of course Israel would have to retaliate. Of course, Israel has nuclear capabilities. They don't speak in it, but they, as a country that is considered as very hostile or a threat by many in the region, or it used to be considered, mm, they obviously learned those lessons since the various Arab wars and the various Israeli wars. The Yom Kippur, there were many conflicts. They of course they won. They defended themselves at the time, but they understand that if they don't defend themselves, then nobody is probably going to do that work for them. They really need to be resilient and capable. So that's the reason for the Israeli military kind of build up, which is obviously a very well equipped military machine, right? They are there because it's existential. If they don't defend, if they don't supply their military with adequate means, then most likely they become prey and vulnerable. This just explains why they are doing, they are keeping that kind of strong military in the state. And obviously the nuclear deterrent of Israel, so to speak. They might not claim it, but we assume that they have that means to defend themselves because of alliances. And Iran, obviously, it has been developing its program. It's not news. It's not something that has been hidden from public eye, not at all. From a long time ago, they they have like that nuclear program, and they say, oh, it's for civilian purposes only or not only. We never know, but obviously, I don't think it's just for civilian purposes. Of course, it is for civilian purposes. Nuclear energy, uh, like I can say it's a reliable source of energy, like the renewables fail. Um, you have solar wind power, which sometimes have their problems. They have their problems if you don't have sun because there's like big clouds blocking, and you don't have wind, and sometimes you cannot rely on the hydric power, hydric generation, because of dams, water dams. And then besides coal, you have like the nuclear energy, right? Because nuclear is like a constant stream of energy. Irrespective, it can be night, day, it's always producing constantly. Of course, there are the security problems because nuclear energy needs to be very, you need to be very careful with that. There have been different hundred dozens of accidents with the nuclear facilities around the world. It's not exclusive of one country or another, and obviously the different countries that use the nuclear energy for these civilian purposes or for in the electric sector, they know that they need to be careful. There are rules, there are norms, and they're not there because of political reasons. They're there because it's important to ensure either protection of the environment, protection of health, safety standards, all these things. Because you see those Fukushima things, you see the Chernobyl and other many more incidents, and nobody likes to have like a problem like that. That the Fukushimas, or not the Fukushimas, but I would say the Chernobyls, like it will last tens of thousands of years for them to get rid of all that nuclear toxic waste and nuclear uh, deposits, the radioactive uh, excessive deposits because of that rapid accident, because of those nuclear incidents. And it's also like one of the reasons why, they were like the monitors, the AIEA, the, the Atomic Agency, they were like monitoring and checking if at least, the country is trying to comply by those safety rules, which obviously I believe that most countries, like they will tend to apply that because nobody wants to threaten like their populations and, even other countries. Chernobyl was not localized in the Soviet Union at the time. It was not localized in Pripyat. It spread out throughout Europe and throughout Northern Europe, everywhere else. So it's important that these steps are taken care concerning the civilian use of nuclear energy. And some people are too enthusiastic about the nuclear and say, yeah, calm down, like it has advantages, but it also has costs. And if you just want to cover up the costs, then we're not talking the same page. So for me, it's like you need to be careful about that kind of energy. It could be useful, it could be a good mix, but it's costly and it has to be very well monitored. This is considering the use of nuclear energy for civilian purposes. And then you have like the allegations that, as I said, like Israel versus Iran. Now they want to build bombs and all those things. Of course, there are other countries who have the nuclear arsenal. It's not exclusive of one or two countries, but they serve as a deterrent because everybody realized that if you start to use like the nuclear deterrent no longer as deterrent but as weapon, then you will be subjected to retaliation. Of course, that's not very good because you have like mutually assured devastation, not to say destruction. And that's one of the reasons why I don't believe in that kind of escalation, in that level of escalation. That doesn't mean there is no conflicts or you will not have conflicts. Of course, there will always be conflicts there, but you will not see that kind of intensity. And then you have uh, these so-called raids, which you have seen from Israel towards um, Iran. Like there were like two different attacks specifically. They attacked either defense facilities or specific military objectives, not civilian areas, not civilian targets, and they were like specific and very localized and scope-based targets at the time. Well, so again, it is like a very limited conversation. The Iran, they send like drones or uh, some some of those like missiles away, but just regular conventional normal missiles. Versus Israel, Israel defended using the Iron Dome, and then they counterstriked Iran. Okay, it seemed like regional contained escalation at the time. And then you have these threats of like the new orange dude in that White House, and he keeps saying, okay, now we will threaten their, Israel, and if Iran does something stupid, or if I just feel like it, we just go there. Again, the typical cowboy adventure. Well, personally, I think we don't need more escalation there. It's not needed. I think de-escalation would rather be more appropriate, and not just between Iran and Israel, because there are other countries in the region, not just and the Arab countries, and people that they rather have stability and things working functional. But we don't know. We never know what's next. And I think like we finished concerning this conflict, conflict area and conflict era, and like I say, with the new ongoing conflict, it's just conflict after another conflict. It's the latest. It's between the India and Pakistan. India and Pakistan. That's also a very decades-old story. You had like on Monday, I guess, it was on. I don't know if it was on Monday, like some 3 days ago. In the beginning of this week, there was like an action of India towards Pakistan, supposedly against supposedly legitimate military targets, and these targets, like they were eventually places where terrorist entities or infiltrates or people who wanted to do violent acts in India, radicals or fanatics, would eventually move. Like they would indoctrinate themselves there. They would gain operational training and ground learning, and eventually they would move to India to carry out potentially terrorist attacks. And India did carried out those strikes, supposedly against those targets, and people or entities within those targets, because allegedly, again, in the opinion of India, that it happens that um, these people or like certain terrorist groups that were operating in India, they were using Pakistan as like a landing pad to just move and to recruit the terrorists and to train them and eventually move them to um, to India to carry out terrorist activities. The Indians mentioned that their recent operation, uh, it was a retaliation against either 2011 and 2016 elections. So it was legitimate self-defense by them. Obviously, a state has the right and the obligation to defend its civilians in case of terrorist attacks. I think it's legitimate. Now, these terrorist groups, what happens is that they are using Pakistani soil or Pakistani territory as a means to develop their radicalizing activity and their terrorist actions, either through theory, indoctrination, and their terrorist camps, where they train and they gain the operational knowledge. Now, India supposedly accused Pakistan of providing of the Pakistani military of being connivant, if not even supporting or not even doing any sort of direct action with these groups, even if not contacting directly or not financially supporting, they tacitly knew that these groups were operating within Pakistan territory, and they know and they just don't do anything. It's a bit like in the Ahmedabad situation, in like it was with Bin Laden. Like it's it's right in front of their eyes, right near their military bases, but somehow they just cannot see those groups. They cannot understand that there are radicals there, or if they understand, they just make a blind eye. They turn a blind eye on it. And it's these kinds of allegations that said, okay, India has had enough. if Pakistan is not willing to take action against these terrorist groups, we will take actions by our own hands. They decided to make justice by their own hands. And there you have first the retaliatory action beginning of this week, and now another one which was yesterday already. So of course, in Pakistan, there's like semi-retaliation, like you see on the Kashmir area, you see on other border areas because it's a very disputed region, and they kind of fight. They do those little small skirmish, like one side fires a shot, the other side counter fires another shot, like a mortar fire by a mortar fire. You have this kind of tit for tat policy too. So as you can see, it's a very conflictual world. You have like it's not just Ukraine, Russia. You have Israel and Palestine, and also now you have like the Pakistan and India, which it's like it's a permanent volcano, but now it's even to new heights. And like what is the solution? The way forward for that? The solution would be peace, right? It's the easiest solution, but I don't see how can uh, I see that peaceful solution is it's going to be difficult because uh, let's say if the causes of the structural problems, for example, in the case of India, if these terrorist camps continue, of course, India will continuously have to continuously attack and defend itself against any perceived or potential threat. So the cause will likely continue. It's like they will stop for now and until next season, until the next episode. And the same goes for Israel and Palestine. If we don't address the structural causes, the lack of a Palestinian state, I think it's an important step forward. Um, and as for the Ukraine and Russia, well, it's probably the most complicated. But I think that uh, like a cessation of hostilities and the recognition of Ukraine to keep its territory and to not be invaded by Russia. But this is another complication. This is even more complicated. So again, a very conflictual and turbulent world we live in today. It didn't used to be like that, but it has certainly become. And we don't know. We don't know how it is going to be. The only thing is that there was also this new pope that was elected. Uh, Supposedly the pope. Like I don't see any virtual material or significant powers. Like you might call it symbolic. Yeah, you might call for people to just make bridges, make peace, but you cannot make peace on the basis of a rock peace. That will only accelerate and intensify conflicts. As much as it costs me to say it, if you create a fake peace, a rotten peace at any cost, you will just corrupt it even more. You'll just make conflict even more harsh and more inept. But at least they can promote the so-called cooperation to try to, just calm down where it is possible, alleviate suffering, uh, very basic stuff, humanitarian stuff. Even it's not with one or two gestures of humanitarianism that you solve major structural problems. And that's just my opinion. My opinion, I think, like even for example, when a country is attacked, when its civilians are have been attacked, murdered, brutalized, and if they're undergoing genocide, then that country has not just the right, the obligation to defend itself, including the right to target other countries who just don't give a shit about that kind of genocide and suffering. So, because you cannot have the so-called neutrality in these situations. You can never be neutral. Um, like, I don't know, of course, yeah, we're never alive by the time, but uh, like the killing of the people in the Nazi Germany, the extermination camps and all those things. It's this kind of genocide you just cannot be complacent with that. And that's exactly what is has been taking place in like the Ukrainian territory. First, there's like this there was this Bucha thing where there were more crimes, obviously, and Mariupol, obviously, it was carpet bombing. It's disgusting. It's like you see the 1990s of the Balkans in Europe all over again. Srebrenica, you name it. It's just the same thing. You keep seeing the same kind of barbarity, like in Rwanda and all those things. So understandable that you don't care or you don't like or you don't want to talk about these issues, but they take place there and it's just in plain sight. Uh, there are tons of other crimes, and I think like Ukraine is just defending itself. It's just defending itself in the European perspective. That's what I see. Um, so, as I said, there's like the new Pope. I don't know what the dude is up to, if he's good, he's bad, or not. The only thing is like it was a seat that was left vacant because the previous Pope he died, right? So once the Pope dies, they need to elect another one. And after the election, which was actually kind of speedy, by the way, I think that 2 days it's not a long time. It's actually a very short time. I would be expecting more. They elected this dude, this Prevost, this American. Okay, so-called Louis 14 or Louis 14. Leo 14. I'm confusing with Louis 14, like the French king before. Okay, it's a Leo 14, and we'll see what kind of propositions he has. But I I don't see that like the church there is in a very ambiguous position because what kind of peace are they proposing? What kind of position are they going to be ambiguous? Are they going to be we want peace for peace for peace? And obviously they will sound shallow if that's the case. Or are they going to take part? I don't think they're going to take part. I think that this is just me thinking, considering what I've seen from the church, and there's disappointment. I think they will just look at it and they will hope that by divine inspiration, they get eventually to a point where, you know, probably a solution comes out of the conflict. But I don't think so. I don't think so. Like I'm not pessimistic, but I'm also quite realistic. And it is what it is. So these were about like the events. That's already some significant time I've been talking here about this. But I think it's interesting that you see on the internet people who are just lazy and not working 12-hour shifts because probably they're not stupid, because they're stupid not to work enough, and instead they could be working instead of doing some live talk. But instead, here we are. Uh, and sometimes I think it's good to address these issues. I don't have any boss telling me what to do or what to think, or any boss policing me how I need to think. It's just how I feel like it. And ideally, we would not have need to talk these issues, but I think it's good. It gives a bit of sauce. You, if you understand a bit more what's taking place out there, even if it's complicated because it is, grasping just bits of it, you understand that you're not living in simple times. You're not living in simple times. Anyway, I don't mind discussing them. I don't run away from discussion, and that's why I come with these gamings and events. And now like it's a topic like for general discussion. And yes, I believe that general discussion is like for anything. Uh, I would say, how can we expect things to improve in the current context, right? Because if it's all hell, doom, and gloom, how can we expect to turn this around? Well, I guess that one of the easiest ways is to start with ourselves. So, how can we exactly start with ourselves? We can start with ourselves by, for example, I personally don't like to be like an overspender. You don't know what's the tomorrows and everything. It's so uncertain that you just decide to contain yourself. So one of the things I do like in this current context is when I hear something or when I'm being talked about, or and talked about something, I rather like to look for myself and just get myself a perception. I don't I don't take the first soundbite. And I think that's probably the first clue I give to you. Don't accept the first thing they feed on you because it's a friend or because it's a person of interest. Don't just accept a shit they decide to feed on. Like think on it, reflect, see different perspectives, or see if the information is truthful, if it is valid, if it is legitimate, if it is not biased, if there's not vested interests behind, if it's not fake info or fake news, and not somebody saying fake, you have to look at all these angles. So I say you have to keep your eyes open. Imagine like you're driving a car, and with information you need to do the same. You need to have your eyes fully open and not just uh, to just see the things you want to see. You have to effectively be aware. So awareness is an advice. Um, Probably some, I would say, humility or modesty. You know, you just don't pretend to know that, okay, yeah, this is a solution. Okay, tariffs. Not just don't come with that kind of thing. If a lot of people are suddenly saying that this is a bad thing, then maybe it definitely is a very bad thing. And you know, we have like to listen. It's not about ego. It's about it's about reason. It's about gravity. Gravity is not for you if you like it or not. It's gravity. It's there. So if you're working on unicorns that deny gravity in the space of gravity, you're just completely delusional. It's Delulu. So Delulu, you're Solulu. Go in that. But like let's just talk on the basis of realism, right? I think it's another good premise to try to solve, like understanding different perspective, realism, but also, and here is another point I want to use, uh, to stand the ground, to not be an appeaser. I think it's also an important advice for today. We see a lot of appeasement of people who are dismissive, complaints dismissive of uh, like people when they have complaints, oh, it's nothing, oh, it's the first time, oh, it's always an excuse, something. And this is not the kind of, you just can do better. You can do better. So being dismissive of problems is not going to solve the problems. It only exacerbates and makes them worse. So I would say that you need to stand your ground and be confrontational, especially when it's not correct, because if everybody had to be correct, we would live in a complete circus, which already it is, and with great dangers, you know, it's not the ideal thing. Uh, like other things that one could do, like learning things that you can learn on yourself, things that depend on you. Yeah, you can try to learn skills, you can try to learn different trades, and most importantly, just don't stick to what they tell you to believe. Don't stick to, you have to believe this, you have to do it, you have to, you know, when I see like especially in the TV, the people who are making comments, why are they think are they thinking that they can police my thoughts? They are dictating how I should think, how you should think. No, it's just not it. And I think like way to move forward here is you need to have your own critical thinking. Some don't like critical thinking, understandably. You live like in like stupid dictatorships, corrupt countries. Uh, but I tell you, they're not examples. They don't bring ingenuity, they don't bring development. So if I believe that, you know, freedom and to some certain degree, ingenuity and freedom are intertwined. And if you start to bashing on people's basic rights and freedoms, then you just don't get creativity. Everything starts to become boring. And it's also so another important thing. You need to stand for. Uh, I think liberty or freedom are very important concepts. And you know that's just my take for today. Uh, I probably would like to talk many other issues, and but these are like the aspects which I've been feeding off lately. And I'm also aware that, for example, the kind of discussions or the kind of talk I take, you will not see them in a lot of places. Uh, some people just are like paid commentators. They're paid to tell you shit, and it doesn't work with me like that way. You just don't manipulate me. You don't tell me with a script of this is what you have to tell to people. No, it doesn't work like that with me. I I just am like that fool, as I call the fool Obi-Wan. He's on his desert. He's on his little plateau. You don't want to listen, or eventually if you go to listen, but I'm kind of like in my own sphere. And personally, I think it's more healthy than to be stuck in a clown circus where it's just not good. Now, obviously, some of you will not be able to even talk or speak about these issues, or if you do it, you are under reprisals. Who knows, by family, friends, relatives, whatever. But there's where there's a will, there's a way. That's what they say. Um, but it's important to be aware of all these issues because, like, when you're facing a little problem, a shittery, an inconvenience in your life, it may be because that shittery is part of another greater thing. Perhaps a more annoying thing that requires studying, that requires working, that's not as obvious, but it's something that eventually affects your life. And that's why I delve into these topics. Uh, Now, I'm not going to say, okay, this commentator is better than the others on the internet. Like each has its own styles. And personally, like I don't like to censorship. That there's people who are like very censorship strict in terms of commentators. And I kind of like refrain myself if I see like a post or not a post. A certain commentator can be flashy, but if I see like attempts to censor or condition, I just like back away. Like it's self-repellent as you prefer. But for me, I think that uh, to have this I even apply to my gaming things. For me, ingenuity and creativity is linked to freedom. So if I don't have that tool, if I don't have those tools of freedom, of my own self autonomy, obviously I cannot progress as much. And this was my small talking from. We started from gaming. We talked about the smurfing, about the events, and these general discussions. We talked more about these events, which were like conflicts, which are stemming a bit everywhere. It's a bit of annoying because people want to have their lives, and yeah, the prices all they just keep going up. And basically, that's also a trend I'm seeing. Like in the past year or the two past years, people in Twitch, we can end the general discussion after this. Um, it was a result of the Twitch has started to lose people. Like people are not they're not as active as before. It's not Twitch, but in general, like there was a spike in post-pandemic, like the COVID years in 2019, 2020. There was a spike, a huge boom, and obviously people fested on it. At the time, I didn't even know what Twitch was. I was like, what the heck is Netflix? Like that TV old ad. I also didn't know about Twitch. I only learned it about like in 2023, something like that. And by that time, already it started to decline progressively. And now, because of, it's also linked to economic cycles, it has been suffered like a smaller, like a more slope, a downward slope, because of um, that kind of problem, of the economy. So how to solve that issue? Well, I think that we need to be resilient, because understandably, when the times are hard and when shit hits the fan, uh, I'd say 80 to 90% of people just leave and back away, and it's a trend. You don't. You cannot expect something different. You know, we people just abandon the ship. That's what they do. And it's an opportunity, I think, these times that are troubling to just come up with something new, some new contents, without rage baiting. I just commit and, say it on my own. And I hope that at least these contents are insightful. They provide like you see a cup of coffee. It's a small chatting thing, but it allows you to get to know a bit more what kind of world are we living or kind of world that is building. Um, like philosophy like, but it's good. Now, to complement this, we're just going to continue with our gameplay. So after this, we'll go with a different kind of stream, which will be like probably U2. I don't see if I have time to make Dota 2 games today. I'll see that too. For now, this is it. Um, have a good day, and we might be back after a small break time. See you then.